Welcome, friends, to another discussion, another necessary analysis of the economic and political system that we are told day in and day out is functioning just fine, while every piece of evidence around us screams that it is in a state of profound structural collapse. I want to talk to you today about a specific week, a specific convergence of events that might seem to the casual observer like separate headlines. You have a Secretary of State in Munich giving a speech. You have an Attorney General in Washington answering, or rather not answering, a question. And you have a bureaucratic announcement from NATO that most people missed entirely because it was designed to be missed. But if you put these three things together, if you look at them through the lens of historical analysis, through the lens of a system that is struggling to maintain its hegemony while its material base crumbles, you see a picture that is terrifyingly clear. It is the picture of an empire that is quietly being stripped of its authority, while its leaders perform a desperate theater of strength to distract you. And I want to start with that theater. I want to start with a moment that perfectly encapsulates the moral and intellectual bankruptcy of the current ruling class in the United States. I am talking about Attorney General Pam Bondi. Now, understand the scene. She is asked a direct, simple question, a question that touches on the deep, dark underbelly of how the wealthy and powerful protect their own. She is asked about the co-conspirators of Jeffrey Epstein. She is asked essentially, will the justice system finally hold the elite accountable for the predation that everyone knows occurred? And what does she do? Does she talk about justice? Does she talk about the victims? Does she talk about the law? No. She looks at the camera. She smiles that politician's smile, and she says, look at the stock market. The Dow is up. The S&P is up. You have to pause and really let that sink in. This is not just an evasion. It is a confession. It is the system telling you exactly what it values. In the mind of the capitalist functionary, the suffering of human beings, the corruption of the elite, the rot at the core of the social contract, none of that matters if the line on the graph is going up. It is the ultimate fetishization of the market. She is telling you that the stock market is the only metric of national health that counts. If the rich are getting richer, if the portfolio values are inflating, then there is no crime, there is no injustice, there is no problem. It is a distraction tactic as old as capitalism itself. Don't look at the exploitation, look at the accumulation. But while she is dazzling you with stock numbers, while she is trying to equate the NASDAQ with moral righteousness, something else is happening, something much more significant, something that tells us the real story of American power in the 21st century. And for this, we have to look across the Atlantic. We have to look at what happened with NATO. For 70 years, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization has been the primary vehicle for American military projection in Europe. It has been the tool by which the United States said to the world, we are the commanders, we are the decision makers. And implicit in that structure was a very simple operational reality. The United States commands the wars. The United States holds the keys. But in this same week, quietly, without the fanfare of press conferences, without the ticker tape parades, NATO announced a restructuring. And what was this restructuring? They are stripping the United States of the operational command of the Joint Force Headquarters. These are the nerve centers. These are the places where the actual warfighting is directed. And where are they going? One is going to the United Kingdom, one is going to Italy, one is being shared between Germany and Poland. Do not let anyone tell you this is just administrative shuffling. In the world of geopolitics, there are no accidents. This is a demotion. This is the allies of the United States looking at Washington and saying, we cannot rely on you anymore. They are looking at the chaos in our domestic politics. They are looking at the oscillation between isolationism and imperialism. They are looking at a debt-ridden economy that can barely sustain its own infrastructure, let alone a global empire. And they are making a rational calculation. They are preparing for a world where the United States is not the hegemon. They are future-proofing their military structures against American instability. And this brings us to the third piece of this puzzle, the theater, the mask. Secretary of State Marco Rubio goes to Munich. Now, the Munich Security Conference is the high mass of the Western liberal order. It is where the elites go to congratulate themselves on their benevolent rule. And Rubio goes there and he gives a speech. And the media, oh, the media loves it. They call it velvet toned. They say he was charming. They say he received applause. But we have to look past the performance. We have to look at the content. Rubio stands there and he effectively recites a script that we have seen before, a script that echoes the neoliberal and neoconservative fusion that has driven us into this ditch. He talks about the climate cult, signaling to the Europeans that the U.S. is checking out of the environmental agreements. He talks about immigration, demanding that Europe adopt the harsh, restrictive policies that are being rolled out at home. He demands more money for defense, always more money for defense. But here is the contradiction. Here is the dialectic at work. He is standing there demanding that Europe follow the U.S. lead at the exact same moment that NATO is stripping the U.S. of its command authority. Do you see the disconnect? He is barking orders like a general, but the troops have already started reporting to a different headquarters. He is using the rhetoric of 1990, of the unipolar moment when the U.S. could snap its fingers and the world would jump. But we are in 2026. The material reality has shifted. The Europeans are applauding him, not because they agree, not because they respect the leadership, but because they are relieved. They are relieved that he is speaking the language of the adult in the room, even if the content is incoherent. They are relieved he isn't threatening to pull out of NATO entirely today, but watch their hands. Watch what they do, not what they clap for. They are moving the headquarters. They are building their own capacity. They are quietly, politely stepping away from the sinking ship of American hegemony. And this is where we have to bring Marx back into the conversation, because this is not just about bad politicians or bad policies. This is about the systemic crisis of late-stage capitalism. The United States economy has been hollowed out. We have shipped our industrial base abroad in search of cheaper labor and higher profits. We have financialized everything, turning our economy into a giant casino, which is why Pam Bondi points to the stock market as the answer to everything. When you don't make things anymore, when you don't produce value, you have to rely on the illusion of value created by finance capital. But you cannot run a global empire on finance capital alone. You need an industrial base. You need a cohesive society. You need a working class that believes in the project. And we have none of that. We have a working class that is being crushed by debt and inflation. We have an infrastructure that is crumbling. And so the empire becomes brittle. It becomes a shell. The ruling class knows this. They are not stupid. Rubio knows it. Bondi knows it. They know that the American century is over, but they cannot say it. They cannot admit it to you, and they certainly cannot admit it to themselves. So they engage in this elaborate performance. They project strength. They talk tough. They point to the Dow Jones Industrial Average. They give speeches in Munich about leadership, but it is a Potemkin village. It is a facade, and the rest of the world sees it. The global South sees it. China sees it. And now even our closest allies in Europe see it. The stripping of the NATO command is the smoking gun. It is the material proof that the balance of power has shifted. The U.S. is being relegated. We are moving from being the indispensable nation to being the unpredictable giant that needs to be managed, contained, and slowly sidelined. We have to understand that this transition is dangerous. Empires do not go quietly into the night. As their power wanes, they often lash out. They become more aggressive, not less. The rhetoric becomes more heated. The demands become more irrational. We see this in Rubio's speech. He is demanding that Europe align with U.S. domestic culture wars on climate, on immigration, as a condition of alliance. This is not the behavior of a confident leader. This is the behavior of a bully who knows he is losing his grip. And what creates this? What is the engine driving this? It is the profit motive. It is the need for the American military-industrial complex to justify its existence even as its strategic utility declines. It is the need for American corporations to force open markets even as they lose competitiveness. The class war at home, the war against workers, the war against the poor, is mirrored by the class war abroad, the attempt to maintain imperial extraction privileges in a world that is saying no. When Pam Bondi deflects to the stock market, she is telling the working class of America, your justice does not matter, your safety does not matter. The only thing that matters is the rate of return on capital. And when NATO moves its command centers, the ruling class of Europe is telling the ruling class of America, we like your money, we like your weapons, but we do not trust your judgment. These are the cracks in the foundation. And if we want to understand where we are going, if we want to prepare for the turmoil that is coming, we have to look at these events not as isolated incidents, but as symptoms of a single unified disease. The disease is a system that prioritizes profit over people, that prioritizes hegemony over cooperation, and that is now running up against the hard limits of history. We are watching the end of an era, and the question we have to ask ourselves as workers, as students, as citizens, is not how do we save the empire? The question is, what comes next? How do we build a system that does not rely on global domination to sustain itself? How do we build an economy where the answer to where is the justice is not look at the stock market, but look at our communities, look at our schools, look at our lives? This is the challenge of our time, and it begins by seeing through the fog. It begins by refusing to be distracted by the velvet speeches and the rising stock tickers. It begins by looking at the hard, cold reality of who commands the armies and who controls the resources. The command is moving. The resources are dwindling. The empire is fading, and we must be ready for what that means. Now, I want you to look closely at the specific geography of this NATO decision, because in the details lies the devil, as they say, or in this case, the truth of the decline. They are moving operational command to the United Kingdom, to Italy, and to a joint command in Germany and Poland. Why these places? Why now? This is not random. This is a diversification of risk. This is the European bourgeoisie, the bankers in London, the industrialists in Frankfurt, the political class in Rome, collectively deciding that the United States is a liability. They are looking at the political polarization in Washington. They are looking at a debt ceiling that becomes a hostage crisis every 6 months. They are looking at a military that cannot meet its recruitment goals, because the young people of America have no interest in dying for ExxonMobil or Raytheon. And they are saying, we need a backup plan. Moving the command to the UK is particularly ironic, isn't it? The UK, the junior partner, the fading empire that taught the United States how to be an empire, is now being tasked with holding the reins because the student has become too erratic. It is a desperate attempt to keep the special relationship alive on life support, to pretend that the Anglosphere still dictates the terms of global engagement. But the reality is that by decentralizing command, by stripping the monopoly of violence from the Pentagon and distributing it across the continent, NATO is admitting that the unipolar moment is dead. The era where Washington picked up the red phone and Europe jumped is over. Now Washington picks up the phone and Europe puts it on hold while they check with Berlin, while they check with London, while they check with their own economic interests, which are increasingly tied to China and the global South, not to the sinking market of the United States. And this brings us back to the spectacle, the absolute theater of Marco Rubio in Munich. You have to appreciate the grim humor of it. Here is a man, a senator, a representative of the American political establishment, standing on a stage in Europe, reading a script that was likely drafted by technocrats and financiers, people like Mark Carney, people who represent the globalist wing of capital, and he is presenting it as if it is a bold new vision of American strength. He is mouthing the words of the very global financial elite that his base claims to despise. He is talking about values and international order at the exact moment that the international order is voting him off the island. It is a performance of power to hide the vacuum of power. When a king is strong, he does not need to constantly remind you he is the king. When an empire is secure, it does not need to send its envoys to lecture allies about unity. The unity is assumed. The obedience is assumed. The fact that Rubio has to go there and effectively beg for relevance, disguised as demanding compliance, proves the weakness. He is like a manager in a failing company shouting about productivity quotas while the workers are already packing up their tools and looking for new jobs. The Europeans clapped yes, they smiled yes, because that is diplomatic protocol. But in the back rooms where the real decisions are made, the decisions about where to put the headquarters, where to buy the energy, where to invest the capital, they are moving away from the United States. And why are they moving away? This is the crucial economic point that we must hammer home. They are moving away because the United States economy is no longer a reliable engine of growth or stability. It is an engine of speculation and inequality. And this brings us back to Pam Bondi and that incredible revealing moment about the stock market. When she says, look at the Dow, she is not just deflecting a question about Jeffrey Epstein. She is revealing the theology of the American ruling class. Think about what the stock market actually is. It is not the economy. It is not the grocery store where you buy your milk. It is not the factory where you weld the steel. It is a market for the ownership shares of the companies that dominate our lives. When the stock market goes up, it means the claims on future profits held by the richest 10% of the population have become more valuable. It often goes up precisely because wages are going down. It goes up when a company announces layoffs. They call it restructuring or efficiency. And the market cheers because labor costs have been cut. So when Bondi says the Dow is up, she is effectively saying the rate of exploitation is high, corporate profits are secure, so why are you bothering me about justice? She is betting that the American people are so conditioned, so brainwashed by 40 years of neoliberal ideology that they will identify with the stock market even though they own almost none of it. She is betting that you will look at the ticker tape on CNN and think, well, the country is doing well, even as your rent goes up, even as your grocery bill doubles, even as your children's school falls apart. It is a psychological trick. It is the ruling class holding up a mirror that reflects only their own success and telling you that you are looking at yourself. But the cracks in the mirror are getting too big to ignore. The disconnect between the economy of the stock market and the economy of human survival is breaking the social contract. And this is why the theater is becoming so desperate. This is why the culture wars are being ratcheted up. Have you noticed? The more the economic base rots, the more the political superstructure obsesses over drag queens, over library books, over which bathroom someone uses. This is not an accident. This is a strategy. If you cannot offer the people a rising standard of living, if you cannot offer them secure jobs, if you cannot offer them a future, you must offer them an enemy. You must turn neighbor against neighbor. You must create a panic about wokeism or socialism or immigrants to distract from the looting of the public treasury by the private sector. Rubio's speech in Munich touched on these themes. He wants to export the American culture war to Europe because it is the only export we have left. We don't export high-speed trains. We don't export affordable solar panels. We export grievance. We export division. We export the toxicity of our own broken political system. And the Europeans are looking at this export and saying, no, thank you. They have their own problems, certainly. European capitalism is in its own crisis. But they are looking at the United States and seeing a society that is tearing itself apart. They see a country where there are more guns than people, where medical bankruptcy is a common occurrence, where the infrastructure looks like the third world, and they are making a cold, hard calculation. The United States is unstable. So NATO strips the command. It is a containment strategy. They are containing the contagion of American decline. They want the military capacity of the U.S., but they don't want the political volatility of the U.S. calling the shots. It is a demotion from CEO to major shareholder. We still have a seat at the board, but we are no longer the chairman. And what happens next? This is the dangerous part. This is the part that keeps me up at night. History teaches us that empires do not accept demotion gracefully. When the British Empire collapsed, it was a messy, violent process, but the U.S. was there to absorb the pieces. Who absorbs the pieces of the American empire? China, the global South, a multipolar chaos. The U.S. ruling class is terrified of this, and a terrified ruling class is a dangerous ruling class. The system is showing us its hand. Bondi showed you the hand. Money over justice. NATO showed you the hand. U.S. hegemony is over. Rubio showed you the hand. We will pretend nothing is changing. Now you have to play your hand, and your hand is the power of labor. Your hand is the power of refusal. Your hand is the power to say, we will not be the foot soldiers for a failing empire. We will not be the victims of a predatory economy. This week, this convergence of the Munich speech, the Bondi deflection, and the NATO restructuring is a signal. It is a bell tolling. It is telling us that the old world is dying. The American century is finished. It is done. You can try to prop it up with speeches. You can try to hide the rot with stock buybacks. You can try to distract the people with culture wars, but the material reality always wins in the end. The command has shifted. The center cannot hold. The question is not whether the empire will fall. It is already falling. The question is whether we will be crushed by the rubble or whether we will use the stones to build a new foundation, a foundation based not on profit not on war, not on the exploitation of the many for the luxury of the few, but on a democratic economy where the people who do the work make the decisions. That is the only future worth fighting for. That is the only way to turn this decline into a renewal. Thank you for joining me. I hope this analysis helps you cut through the noise, cut through the theater, and see the reality of the world we are living in. It is a scary reality, yes, but it is only by facing it squarely, without illusions, that we can hope to change it. Stay safe, stay organized, and as always, let's get to work.